Quick question? The quiz is homework. So here we go. We're going to talk about lab safety quiz
Wait, what about the thing we just did?
after we go over the lab safety rules. So we just spent a lot of time on the charting practice number 2.
Do we submit that?
So that's just practice. You don't have to submit it. If you need help with organizing data and numbers with the charting, make sure you check out the recording here. It's near the end. You're responsible for knowing how to make tables and charts. We're not going to spend any more class time on that. So come on into office hour, but realize that you're going to need it for your next class. So your homework, if you don't know how to make a chart, you should be able to do that within 10 minutes. The goal is to get down to 5 minutes. Those aren't complicated formulas, and it's not a complicated table or chart. So that's a skill that you should be able to just do really quickly. And so now I'm going to click over here to modules and show you where the lab safety stuff is. And you can click into yours too if you'd like, or just kind of check out what's happening up here on the screen. Lab safety rules, it's underneath class notes. So there are a few pictures, and I'm going to go over some of these, but not all. You're responsible for knowing all these. Now in the last class, I had skipped over a couple of the lab safety rules, and they said, well, you didn't tell us how to test for smelling. So it's in here, and I said, oh yeah, I did miss that one. So look this over, make sure that you understand all of them. I'm not going to bore you by reading some obvious ones. The lab safety rules can be summed up pretty easily, and that is follow the recipe, don't veer off the directions, don't goof off, and don't horse around, and clean up after yourself. And we will go through some other safety things. So for dress code, that means that if you're wearing a tie and you're leaning over some stain, you're going to stain your tie. Or girls with long hair, you should put it into a ponytail so it doesn't fall down onto your microscope and get in the way. Or the strings to your hoodie, things like that. And there's no eating and really drinking when you're at the lab table. Keep your book bag off to the side. We're going to have quite a bit of glassware on the table. So sometimes it gets pretty busy and you're aware of your own stuff, but then your neighbor right over here might have some stuff and you can knock it over. If things break accidentally, that's okay, but try to be neat and it avoids the accidents. And we'll go over some of the glassware here in a bit. General safety is know the safety things around this classroom and at your house. You should have a fire extinguisher near your kitchen because that's where most household fires start.
Garage.
And the garage. So right inside the garage. So the kitchen and the garage are usually close to each other, down a hallway or whatever. And so those are where you should have a charged up. Sometimes they get old and discharged, so they only have a certain life and they have to be replaced. Also in this classroom, we have, in all classrooms, a kit for emergencies. So it's got bandages and tourniquets and stuff. And, we have to be prepared for even some pretty crazy things, violence in classrooms with shootings and things. We'll do some training for that. Mm-hmm. The City of Santa Ana Police Department has made a video on how we should respond in certain situations, so that training's coming up later. But also, first aid in the classroom can be with the telephone. So every classroom has a phone right here, and you don't have to hit 9. It just gives you a dial tone. Right by the phone are emergency numbers. And there's also a sign here for cardiac arrest. If someone, student or teachers need help, know how to respond by dialing 911. But not for all emergencies, just for cardiac emergencies. We deal with the nurse and our security and emergency numbers here on campus unless it's heart issues. And in my couple of decades here, I've had 3 emergencies where we've had the paramedics and the nurse, and people have gone to the hospital and been okay. And There's other times when someone barely pulled through with emergencies here on campus, students even. So these things do happen. We want to be as prepared as possible. And that's it for first aid. Oh, how about the gas spigots at your table? They're turned off at the source, so if you were to turn it so that the handle is perpendicular with the pipe, it's, so to speak, on, but there's no gas coming out. Turned off at the source. This is turned off. Whenever you turn a gas line or a water line, it's called a gate valve. When it's like that, it's turned off. You should also know where your gas turnoff is at your house. Because if there's an earthquake, knock on wood, damage the shaking causes pipe breakage and gas leaks in the house. So usually neighborhoods and cities can burn down after an earthquake because of gas fire. So it takes a wrench to turn that so it's perpendicular. It's right outside the house. So make sure you know where the gas meter is, and the pipe leading to the gas meter is where the shut-off valve is for that. You should know where the electrical switches are for the fuse box. So you're old enough to know, especially if you're the only one at home and maybe babysitting. We don't deal with Bunsen burners. That's why these are turned off. We don't deal with flames. So we will have a hot plate though. And don't try to melt something. Don't try to burn paper. Just for its intended purpose to heat up water and to boil. But that's one area where you want to be careful. All science classes are pretty similar. On this first floor, it's all life science. Upstairs, it's chemistry and physics. They do a lot more with flames. They have their shower turned on. Every classroom has a shower in the corner, emergency shower that you'd pull the handle, or an eye wash station. So it's turned off. There's no drains on the floor. If we need water, they're in the sinks. So between every lab table, there are sinks that you could splash water on your face, and we'll send you to the nurse. Wash your hands is guidance for staying clean for the virus, but also keeps your materials clean. So wash maybe before you start the lab. Definitely wash after the lab. There's soap and towels hanging on the wall. Use chemicals safely. Don't try to mix chemicals for the fun of it. And as I mentioned, if you're trying to smell something, chemistry does this quite a bit. You waft some of the fumes your way instead of sticking your nose underneath it. You could burn the membranes of your nose if you don't do it properly, and it's pretty noxious. We do a little bit of work with some dilute acids and stains, so you might be wearing gloves, safety goggles, maybe even an apron to keep your clothes from getting stain on it. So up in the top drawer, right there in the cabinet, you'll find that personal protection stuff. Now you see how she is touching the tip of like an eyedropper? This is called a pipette. It's used really to load up gels for DNA analysis. So it's a one-time use tip, and then they would throw it away. You would never touch your pipette to the surface of something. You're going to contaminate the pipette tip and the object you're dealing with. If you're asked to drop water from a pipette, make sure it goes through the air. Don't let it rest on anything. When you're filling something up like into a container and you're asked to get so much and you go, oh, I did too much, I better pour some back. Never pour liquids back into the container that they came from. This jar, you expect it to be clean, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's got some powder that now is dissolved in here, and so now this isn't pure anymore if you were to pour it back in there. So we'll have a place for you to do over pour, or maybe you can just help out your neighbor if they still need that. You guys know what this is called?
Beaker.
A beaker. If it has lines for measurements, it's called a graduated beaker. This is a cylinder with lines on it, so it's called a graduated cylinder. So at your lab table, you do have a small beaker and you have a small graduated cylinder. These are test tubes that would be held in a rack because otherwise they just kind of take off and roll. And this is a Petri dish that will have an object, sometimes has a cover on it. We could grow bacteria and stuff in agar with that. This is called an Erlenmeyer flask or flask. It has a narrow opening and that is useful for just spinning it and kind of mixing without having a stirring rod. And so it's a little bit more spill proof. So you need to know the names of those guys. And we're almost done. We'll do a scalpel next semester. So we'll talk about how easy those things are to break if you are putting force on it from an angle. And then the end of the experiment rules are clean up after yourself. Make it look just like it was when you started. You might have to wash or wipe off the table. And for the most part, your paper towels will do the job. So that's it. Let's see if you can click into the quiz. Because just a bit ago, I ran out of students. Lab safety quiz. Can you click into this?
I have to do it right now. Question, what was the big one called?
We have 8 minutes, so yes, you can get through the 20 questions. This is at your own pace. So if you don't score 100%, try it again the next time. Does it allow you to play it again?
Yeah.
Yes. If you don't score 100%, you can take it again, and you have until tomorrow to do so. Yeah.
What was could you say them again, please?
The flask with the narrow opening, or beaker, graduated cylinder.
Okay, so it's graduated cylinder, then the long one is the beaker. Oh no, the beaker is this.
Beakers are like cups.
Okay, beaker.
So that's a beaker. This is a flask. Graduated cylinder. Petri dish and test tube.
Where'd you find that? It says join the game.
Yep. Put your first name and last initial.
Oh, this is the quiz?
Yeah. Oh, 90 seconds.
You have to
Oh,
go
let's get a hundred and test.
You should be able to
Ten
get
is the max? Ten the max?
You done wrong?
Oh.
Oh, I got one wrong. Oh my, I already got one wrong. I got the first one wrong. Which one did test? I did.
76.
If
Glassware, don't do
I'm
anything.
screenshotting all the ones that I get wrong.
Let's go.
These are pretty basic.
Oh no, I was right.
First